The birth of Christ is one of the biggest events in human history and in the Church's annual calendar, but the feast days immediately after Christmas are often overlooked. Those days include honoring the first martyr, one of the four gospel writers, and the innocent babies murdered by King Herod. We're joined by Dr. Matthew Bunson, an EWTN senior contributor. Matthew, the feast days after Christmas are sometimes overlooked by the faithful. What can we learn about them?
Well, if we look at the octaves of Christmas, stretching from the Nativity of our Lord all the way to the Feast of Mary, Mother of God, we have this intense focus on what? On the Incarnation and the ramifications of the Incarnation in the lives of the faithful. So with that as sort of our lens, we begin looking at some of these individual feast days, and what we see is some remarkable martyrs, those who made a choice, who gave their lives for Christ, but who also emulated the suffering of our Lord. So the Feast of Christmas is a joyous time, but it also focuses on the suffering of our Lord and the anticipation of that in the lives of these martyrs.
You talk about those martyrs. One of the big ones, of course, is St. Stephen. Tell us about him and how that sort of connects to the suffering.
Well, we have the proto-martyr of the faith, someone who gave his life, the first martyr for the faith that we know of. We have the account of St. Paul, who was, as he wrote himself, consenting unto his death. We read that in the Acts of the Apostles. What we find with St. Stephen is not only is he the first martyr, but he's the first great public witness in death to our Lord. And in looking again at that incarnational reality, we see that he wanted to partake in the suffering of our Lord, and to die as our Lord did. And so we start, in a way, the week, that octave, in a very profound way.
What about the Holy Innocents? Tell us a little bit about them.
The Holy Innocents, what we're looking at, is what St. Augustine referred to as the first blossom of the cold winter of persecution. So we have these innocents who died. Why? Because King Herod wanted to expunge, to exterminate the threat to him of Christ. So Herod had a choice to make. He could worship and accept that the King of Kings had been born, but no, he wouldn't. He rejected it. And so others suffered for Christ. So we have in these holy innocents what were truly innocents, those who died that Christ might suffer. And that's something that we need to be aware of as well, as the innocents suffer persecution and death, and those who try to wipe out Christianity around the world.
Sure. Let's talk now, switch gears. Let's talk about St. Thomas Becket and how he's been celebrated, of course.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Becket not only is, as we can often say, somebody who chose to be God's minister, God's servant before any kings, to borrow the phrase from St. Thomas More, another great Thomas from England. But he was also fully aware, not only defending Christ, but Christ's church. So in his death in 1170, he was standing up against the state, King Henry II of England, and making a declaration that he was willing to die for the faith, to defend Christ's church, and in that sense, to die for Christ as well.
So many important martyrs. How do you think Catholics can better get most out of the Christmas octave and these days following Christmas?
Yeah, by focusing, of course, on the octave itself, by noting that we are continuing the celebration of Christmas all the way to Mary Theotokos, Mary the Mother of God, by keeping our focus first on Christ, of course, and the celebration of the Nativity, but also on the witnesses who died for Christ, those whose lives are exemplaries. They're exemplary for us as Catholics, as believers. Study the lives of St. Stephen, study the life of Thomas Becket, study the life also of the Holy Family, which is another one of those feasts that falls within the octave.
Just another reminder that Christmas doesn't end with Christmas Day. So many important people to pray to and meditate on.
Exactly.
Matthew Bunson, EWTN senior contributor, thanks so much for talking with us about it.
Privileged to be with you.